Today on our 2016 Chevrolet Equinox, we're going to be taking a look at and installing the SMI Air Force One supplemental braking system for motorhomes with air brakes, part number SM99243. Here's what the Air Force One is going to look like once it's installed on the vehicle. As you can see, everything is nice and compact and up out of the way, so it's not in the way of the driver's feet at all. It's going to be permanently installed so that this air cylinder will be the only thing on the brake pedal, and you won't have to take anything out in order to press the brake pedal. The air cylinder is pulled down by a cable mounted to the firewall, and it uses the pressure from the air brakes to depress it. This is a proportional braking system, so the harder you apply the brakes in the motorhome, the harder it will apply the brakes in the towed vehicle. The system comes with a breakaway switch, and when you pull the breakaway switch, it'll activate the brakes on the towed vehicle, and that way, if your vehicle ever comes disconnected from the motorhome, it'll pull it safely to a stop. The air line that connects the motorhome to the towed vehicle connects using simple air connections at either end. The other end of that airline fitting is going to use the same style so that it's nice and easy to disconnect and connect when in use. On the dash here, we've got a red LED light that's nice and bright, so when the brakes are applied in the towed vehicle, this will light up in order to let you know in your motorhome that the brakes are active. One of the really nice things about this braking system is that since it's permanently installed, once you get your vehicle hooked up to your motorhome, you're ready to go. There's no other special requirements in order to take off. Now that we've gone over some features, let's go over how to install the Air Force One. The first thing you'll want to do is figure out a good place to mount your operating unit. And on this one, we mounted it just inside this front core support here. So then it's between this part of our air dam on our air intake and that core support. Now, since we've already got our fascia off, that's a good time that we're going to go ahead and install our breakaway switch. Now we can take the one end of our air line once we know how much we'll need, put it in there in the fitting and push it in. Once you meet friction, it should go in a little bit further and then lock in place. The air line and the wires for the breakaway switch, I routed both of those up along the same path. Brought them up here, and then across and up towards where I'll mount the box underneath the hood there. So then it came out up here. These two black wires that come out of the bottom of our operating unit, one of those, we run it down and connect it to the blue wire coming off the breakaway switch. And the other one, we take it and use one of the ring terminals provided with the kit to ground it to the frame. Then underneath the dash, you can route your air line that needs to go inside the vehicle and your brown wire that's going to have to be connected to the reed switch. You can route those through a grommet in the firewall. And the one that we used was the one that the hood latch cable runs through. Then I routed the air line from the firewall up to my operating unit and put it into the air out, because the one that comes from the front of the vehicle is going to go into our air in port. Then here is where the vacuum line that we're going to tee into, that's where we're going to take our extra hose and plug it in, is that vacuum port right there. We had to tee into the vacuum line that's coming off the brake booster here in order to get our vacuum for our Air Force One operating unit. And this line is 1/2 inch line, but we had to adapt it down to 3/8 line in order to put our T-fitting in to run our line to the operating unit. So we had to use adapters like these in order to adapt it. The instructions explain how to use these adapters properly. Down here is our T-fitting, and you can see that we've also got this line here, and that's the one that we added that runs to our operating unit. Mounted our LED strip up here on the dash, which is the indicator for when the brakes in the vehicle are active. I mounted it using the hook and loop fasteners that are sticky on the outside of each strip. I took the wire and routed it and just used a flathead screwdriver to just tuck it down here along the base of the windshield. and ran that all the way across. And I didn't have quite enough length, so I used the red and black wires that came with the kit and butt connectors to run it in. And I tucked it all the way down through there and ran it down here along the side. So here I've got the red and black wires that came down along the side, and I just popped this side out. It's got a couple clips that hold it in place. You can just pop that right out. Then you can take your reed switch and connect the wires matching the colors according to the instructions. But the black wire coming down from the dash, you'll actually need to take another short section and double it up so that you can run a short length of wire out in order to run it to a position to ground it. So I ran that extra short distance of wire back up along the side of the door here. Then right there, I used a self-tapping screw and the ring terminal that comes with the kit in order to ground it. Now we can mount up our air cylinder to the arm of the brake pedal. And when we do that, we do want to try to get it as low as possible without interfering with the function of the driver's foot on the pedal when it's not being towed behind the vehicle. But the lower it is, the better it will work. It also has this air fitting in order to plug our air line into. And then right there is where our reed switch is going to go. You slide the reed switch in, and then the reed switch has that small set screw on it that you'll tighten down once you've got it in a position. And then on the back of our air cylinder here, we've got our cable with our adjustment, and this will tighten it down to the firewall. Now when we mount this, we want to make sure that it goes flush against the firewall and there's no carpet or insulation or anything like that in between. This needs to go to bare metal. And you can use the nice large self-tapping screw in order to tighten that down. In order to adjust it, because you want about a 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch of slack in this line when it's not being used. And in order to adjust it, you'll need a 5/32 Allen key, and that'll allow you to adjust that, and then you can pull it through and tighten it back down. So here's what the air cylinder is going to look like once you've got it installed and all adjusted properly. You're going to have your air line that runs into the air fitting, and you want to make sure that's all the way seated. You'll have your reed switch that's down here and tighten with the set screw. And you'll have this tightened down to where this plate bends just a little bit. Now, with this air cylinder, you can mount it the other direction to where these studs come out this way. It's all really your preference, and whichever gives you more clearance. And then we cleared out the area here to mount our cable adjuster. And then we've got our cable here with just a little bit of slack. The orange and black wire off the breakaway switch I had to extend using some of my excess brown wire. But then I brought both of the brown wires together here in order to connect them. So then they could go to my inline fuse holder, which then I attach the ring terminal to the one end of my inline fuse holder and put it underneath the positive jump post here at the fuse box under the hood. With everything else hooked up, I can take my 10 amp fuse and install it into the fuse holder. With the 10 amp fuse in, I can replace my dust cap and then make sure that it's secured and out of the way. Here at the rear of the RV, we'll first take a look at the air fitting that is connected at the hitch. In order to mount our fitting to our hitch, we used universal mounting bracket, part number 18140, drilled a couple holes in it in order to get our bracket to fit, and then tightened it down. The air line is routed up towards the air assembly unit that comes with the Air Force One kit, which is mounted on the frame or a cross member near the airlines. And when routing your airline, you want to be sure to keep it away from anything that may get too hot and damage the airline or any moving parts. Now we'll go underneath the motorhome. Here's where we mounted our air tank assembly on the outside of the frame rail. It's a good idea, if you can, to mount this at a location that has existing holes. If not, you may have to drill holes in the frame to secure it. You'll also want to try to mount it somewhere between the air brake lines and the fitting at the rear. Something to keep in mind when mounting the air tank assembly You'll want to keep it upright as much as possible. You can mount it horizontally if absolutely necessary, but it's best to keep it upright. Here's the air line that we routed from the fitting at the rear, across the hitch, and along the outside of the frame rail to our air tank assembly. The air line that goes into the side of the tank on our assembly is going to go to the large supplied air line for the air brakes on the motorhome. Underneath the black tank, that air line is going to go to the metered air on the motorhome. The other two air lines we routed up to just in front of the rear axle so that we could tap them into the metered air and supply air lines. Here's where we teed into the large green supply line, and we use the T-fitting in order to tap into it, and then we've got the 1/4 inch air line that goes towards our air tank assembly that goes out the other side of the T. Here's the T for our metered air. We cut into the smaller black line and then used the 1/4 inch air line to route towards our air tank assembly. And you will want to make sure that you cut into the metered air and not a different line. When you make all these connections, you want to make sure that you have a nice clean cut so that they go all the way into the push lock fittings. And you want to make sure they fully seat. That's going to complete our look at and installation of the SMI Air Force One supplemental braking system for motorhomes with air brakes, part number SM99243 on our 2016 Chevrolet Equinox.
Click the link below to shop, learn more, or visit us at eTrailer.com.